So my front stack was React.js and my backend stack was Python Django. So I had a good exposure of Python Django as well.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So what is your understanding on React's architecture? How things work in React?
Okay, so the architecture of React is like everything is divided into components. So first of all, the things to get on the React first is that it's not a framework, right? So it's a library. So that is the beauty of React. It's a small library. So everything you want, you can instantly download it or install it, right? The framework that such as Angular, everything comes as a packed one. So it becomes a pretty heavy site or a heavy application. But in React, it's a lightweight and robust application. So everything is divided into components. However, now since Angular 2, everything is divided into components in Angular as well. So what happens in React is it has a virtual DOM and a real DOM. So whenever things happen or state changes or prompt changes, so first it will compare the virtual DOM. If something changes, then it updates the real DOM. So this is called the diffing algorithm that Facebook has used while developing the React back into 2013 before it was initially released. So since then, there are many lifecycle hooks. Like previously in React, when I started using React, there were only class-based components. So the class-based components are fine, but they are lengthy. But as compared to functional components, they introduce the concept of hooks. I really like the concept of functional components. I preferably choose hooks over the lifecycle methods of class-based components. Okay. But yeah, I have pretty good hands on both the class-based and the functional-based components.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned about virtual DOM as well. So can you elaborate a little more on it? So how things work in virtual DOM as well?
Yeah. So what happened is in the every HTML website, like the current one that we're using as well, everything comes into a DOM structure. So document object it's a document object model. So everything comes in the DOM, like body is a node. Everything is divided into node, like body, head. These are all the nodes. So whenever we develop any application, this concept is not available in Angular. Yeah, so it's available only in React. So whenever we update anything, or React creates a virtual DOM, like a shallow copy of the real DOM. It keeps in its memory or so it keeps a virtual DOM and it keeps on comparing that virtual DOM with the original DOM of the web browser, right? So it's the same implementation. It has all the nodes. The virtual DOM has all the nodes, and it's lightweight as well. So it doesn't make our application heavy or something like that. So it's just virtual representation of what is happening in the real DOM and what is happening in the virtual DOM. So what happens is if in a React application, if a state, let's say loading goes from true to false, in the virtual tree, let's say a node loading, it gets updated. So what happens is before updating the actual DOM, first it compares what states have been changed, what components have been changed, and then it compares only the loading section has been changed, right? So it will only update the same node in the real DOM, not everything in the DOM. So it prevents from the full refreshing. It only refreshes that component only.
Okay.
So do you mind if I sip coffee? If I sip my coffee, do you mind?
No, go ahead. Be comfortable. So what happens, let's say if any node is changed, in the virtual DOM, what happens to the child node? So does that also get impacted, or what exactly happens to the child?
Or actually the thing is, what happens? So you were asking about what happens to the child node?
Yes.
Or the component?
No, node in the virtual DOM. So one node is maybe you mentioned that is changed, right? With the comparison. Okay. Now it's a virtual DOM is a tree structure, right? So if one node is impacted or changed, then what happens to the child nodes? Are those also impacted or changed or what?
A full comparison is run through the virtual DOM, and even in the real DOM also full comparison has been done. So let's say loading has subchilds, let's say text, like parent has a node loading and the child node has the p tag that displays the text, right? So if I change something on the parent node, so the child won't get affected, but the comparison will still run between all the nodes of the child as well. Like if something might happen or something might have changed state or props, then only if let's say if the child node also gets affected or also has been changed, its value has been changed, only that in that condition only that will re-render.
Okay.
Not depending upon its parent.
No. So re-rendering is little different. So okay. So we can consider as if we can have one example as let's say login page. Okay, login page is my parent component, and I have few buttons into it, right? Standard buttons are there, like a submit button when user will enter his credentials, submit button again, forget password button is there, right? So few child components are there. Now my parent component by any chance re-renders, okay? Maybe state is changed, maybe it has received a new prop, whatever it could be, okay? So my parent is re-rendering. What happens to my child component? Will that also re-render by default or not?
Right. No, it won't.
Okay. So what if my parent, or not my parent, my child component is a functional component. It's a simple function which is returning some JSX code. Okay. What happens? Will it re-render or call the function or not?
You are saying that if your component is a functional one, it will re-render or not?
Correct.
Okay, the child component is the functional component, and you are asking if it will re-render or not.
Correct.
Okay, no. So only the child component will only re-render if its state has been changed.
Okay, so that means
or something or a past props is changing, like some value has been changed in child component. Only in that condition it's going to re-render and updates the value. Otherwise it won't get affected.
Okay. So that means the render method will not get called, right, by default?
Yeah.
Okay.
And even you can use like React memo. So what it does, it also does a shallow comparison. Only so a lifecycle method that is I think should component update happens. So by default it's true in every components, right? So if you use React memo, so it does a shallow comparison. So only if everything in the state or the props changes, only then that component will like re-render or something. So it's pretty useful for the performance optimization as well.
Okay. So what does should component update lifecycle do actually, or what does it return?
Okay, so it always returns some boolean value. So it can be either false or either true.
Okay, what is the default value if you don't implement that lifecycle?
True. The default value is true. Yes.
What does it mean? True. What does it mean? If it is true, what does it mean? And if it is false, what does it mean?
So if it is true, like it will re-render the component if something like if some states are, if a state value is changed or a prop value is changed, it will re-render, right? But if you use React memo, in that we have that power to like disable it, and like not kind of a power, it's like when we use React memo, what it does, it does a shallow comparison. So let's say React memo, we use a React memo on a pure function. So a pure function will return only the values which is intended to be. It won't like do anything out of the box for that. So what will happen, like if you use React memo or should component update is set to the false, only then what will happen, it will compare and see if the values has been changed or not. It will compare the virtual DOM and it sees that no value has been changed. So what it will does, it will prevent the re-rendering of the child. Like I'm assuming child here is using the React memo.
So but you already mentioned that it doesn't re-render, right? If the child component
it doesn't re-render.
So then what is the use case of use memo then? If it doesn't re-render, you already mentioned that by default it doesn't re-render, right? let's say one example, okay, let's consider only class components, okay, let's forget about functional component, okay. Okay, now that you have mentioned that by default it doesn't re-render, right?
Yeah, by default it doesn't re-render until or unless the state has been changed.
Okay, then should component did update by default is true, right? You just mentioned. So that means it will re-render, you are passing the true value.
By default
it is true. It is
true. Default value is true. Yeah.
That means it should re-render if by default it is true. So you're basically, I'm saying is both the statements are contradictory to each other.
Yeah.
Should component update is, if it is by default true, then it means by default re-render every time. And you said that child component will not re-render by default. So those are two different contradicting statements. I just wanted to understand.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go with this. Sure. I'm also getting it. Okay, so what happened? Should component update that? It's by default is true.
So your child component usually renders every time your parent component is rendered. Whether it is a function component or it is a class-based component, it doesn't matter. Your component will re-render every time. Now what functional class-based component will do is, it will implement, or you will have to implement should component update to check whether you have to render it or not. If you want to stop it, pass it as false. If you, by default it is true, but that means it will re-render every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does a comparison of the previous state and previous props, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So, alright. How do you implement the APIs in your application?
API integration?
Yeah. So, what is your approach?
So I use a library called Xoriant. It's a pretty famous library.
Yeah.
So first, I define the environment variables, and in that environment variables, I pass the endpoint, like the base URL. Right? So it's a secure way to provide the base URL, and then in my component, let's say app.js or any parent component or child component, I use the component at mount lifecycle if it's a class-based component, and in that I call the exeos.get or a post method. I provide the api.url, process.env.api.url, and then at the end I change the endpoint. Like if I am get user data will be the endpoint, the rest base URL will remain the same. In the functional component, I use userFit. So same process happens. I will call the Axios library and get post or put patch every method that has been required, and I change the end URL. Like this time can be logout user or any API example.
Okay. Alright.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, coming back to the example that we were discussing, login page. Okay. Let's say your login will success based on, basically you will make user logged in based on multiple APIs. Let me be a scenario where you have to handle multiple APIs, right? So just wanted to understand this scenario. Say login itself will happen with 3 API calls. Okay. So how will you implement that? So the user will enter its credential and click on submit button. Now what? How will you handle 3 API calls?
3 API calls, okay. So once you click the submit button, so first I will fire the first API, right? So once I receive the status of 200 from that API, then I will call the second API, right? Once I receive the status from the second API, like if it has a return tag status code of 200, that means the API has been completed. Then I will call the last API.
Okay.
So I will arrange them in if else condition or any condition. But the thing is, I will always wait for the status code of 200, and I will arrange the API in the order that they are supposed to be. So once I receive the status code of 200, or if it's failed, then I will jump out from the loop and show some error message that something is wrong or you have entered some wrong credential or etc.
Okay. So getting the response, what is the approach of implementing, getting the response? Whether you will implement callback methods, success callback method, failure callback method, or you will use async await, or you will use promises. How basically approach?
Okay, so I mostly use async await. Like in my Angular applications as well, I use async await there as well. So I will use I will apply like if it's a class-based component, I will make the component head mount async. Like if it's not happening in component head mount, then I will make that function login function async. So I will create a variable like let result and is equals to await, then the API endpoints exeos.post or whatever it is, and I will wait for the response. Once I get the response, I will chain through the status. If it's 200 returning success, I will fire up the second API in the same way, and so on.
Okay. All right. So if you implement this way, let's say maybe you will, how will you catch the error? Whether you will write inside your code into try catch or how?
Yeah, I will use the try catch. Like I will use the try catch, and if that's not the scenario, then like earlier I used .then and catch, but now I use async, and then I implement the try catch and catch blocks.
Okay. Now what happens, like you have implemented all these three APIs inside try catch, right? So you will write this async await inside try, and if there is an error, you will you will write in the catcher, right?
Yeah.
Handle it in the catcher. Okay. So now let's say if you are making first API call using async await, okay, you will get the response, and now you will make the second API call. Okay. What happens if one of the API call is failing? Let's say first or second API is failing. Okay.
Yes.
Now what happens to the third one? Will it get called or not called? Or that I think
no. If the second API fails, it returns nothing or status of 400, then I will jump out from the try catch block, and I will return from the I will get into the catch block and show the error. But there is no point of calling the third API if the middle one has failed, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So even if the first API fails, then in that use case also I won't run the second and the third API. There's no point of you calling them, since the first API that has been called, since it hasn't responded with the status code of 200, means it's not successful. Then what's the point of calling the other API and making too much network requests, right?
Right. Okay. All right. Okay. So how do you handle styling of the components?
Styling of the components.
Yeah.
Like the UI one that you're talking about, like I use mostly libraries, and I use libraries like Bootstrap, Material UI, Semantic UI I have used, and recently I was using InDesign, so InDesign is pretty well as well.
Okay. So have you ever gone through CSS files as well?
Yeah, like previously, when we weren't allowed to like use these libraries, like if a client has requirement of that he doesn't want to use any library, he says no, like I don't want to use, I want to keep it raw and like real. I will provide you the design, Figma, AutoBXG's design, and you have to implement it using CSS only, so that the file size won't get. In that case, in that scenario, we use like the raw CSS, and like we arrange a file, let's say a file loader, and then it's CSS I have given, and or even I can also arrange them in main style.css as well. So it totally depends, like what is the requirement of the client and how he wants to be implemented.
Right.
But yeah, in the requirement analysis, we always suggest them and shows that what can be done, and like he can use these libraries. These are the free ones. These are the paid ones. We always like do the proper requirement analysis at the very beginning. So if he denies, then we go with the raw CSS.
Okay. All right. Okay. So do you know when you create or use any function inside a class-based component, basically you used to bind that function.
Yeah, we used to bind that, but now since arrow function, we don't need to bind those functions.
Okay, not about the arrow function, but other function. What exactly is that binding if you use other function? What does it mean by binding?
Like binding is used for the this keyword, right? So this has the, everyone knows that this has the global target. So if I open my console and do the console.log this, it will give me the window object, right? So in the function as well, if I do this, so it is quite difficult to tell if it's referring to the function or it's like calling the main component. So we use the bind method to like bind like this dot handle function, and I want to bind this to this. So the format is like this dot handle click dot bind, in the parentheses we get this. So and we initialize that in the constructor.
Okay, alright. So one about JavaScript, I want to understand how this works. Okay. So if you create any array using constant, so does that mean you can change the values or append the array?
Yeah, like you can change the values. You can push the values into the array and update the values. That doesn't depend upon if it's a constant or a text. The array values can be appended and can be removed.
So how does it happen? Do you know how does it happen? Because it's a constant, right? Now if you're changing array, so what does it mean by constant then?
So the thing is like whenever like if you use a map function, it creates another array. So the original array remains intact, right? So we get a new array. So the mutability of the original array, we don't disturb the original array. Now we can we can use the map function and can perform our other function on this new array. So due to this, our original array remains intact, and we can perform or remove the elements of the array or add the elements of the array. And this like we can disturb or manipulate this array without worrying about the original.
No, so you are saying that if I push anything, that means it is creating a new array?
No, if you are using the map function, then only. If you are using no function, like you are simply using the array.push, then the original array will get the add-on of the element that you are trying to push.
Correct. So that is what actually I was trying to understand. So if you are creating an array using constant and you are pushing something right into the that array, so what does that constant mean then? So because it's not a constant, right? You are appending something into the array, or you are manipulating the array actually. So how does that constant mean there?
So the var, lit, and constant. These only work on the like variables like integer, string, and I don't think they work on the like if it's an array, right? So if I try to like change the array from array 1 to array 2, that won't happen. But I can append these values because I usually do day-to-day life whenever I'm manipulating an array or displaying something on the UI. I use the manipulation and I push the array, so the const array it appends all the values without any throwing up any error.
Okay. Alright. So have you heard about like by references? Arrays and objects are by reference, accessed by references.
Yeah, actually everything in the JavaScript is all based from the object as well. So like even if you do like create an array and you do console.log dot underscore proto underscore, so it will return you the object from which it's created. So an array can have all the the methods like toString that an object has.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Okay.